impact. How do you influence people with your voice? Very important. You don't necessarily have to become a public speaker, but when you're in a room and you speak, do people listen to you? What is it that causes a person to be heard, and what is it that causes a person to not be heard? What are the things that you can do? So let's start with the 7 deadly sins of speaking. When you're in a room and you're talking to people, we're going to actually talk about all the different spheres of speaking. But today we're just going to focus on your personal influence, and we're going to bridge over into presentation and branding yourself. But first of all, we have to talk about as you're influencing other people. When you're sitting in a room, you're sitting at a coffee table, you're sitting and having lunch with somebody. 7 deadly sins of speech. Now, one of the things that fascinated me about this is when I was younger, I noticed that nobody listened to me. I realized that, at 10 years old, I had a lot to say, but nobody knew that. And I didn't know what it was going to take for me to influence people. And for the longest time, for years, I struggled with what is it that causes some people, when they start to speak, to be heard, and other people to be almost completely ignored. So I'm going to talk to you about that. First thing, probably the most important, judging. That when someone hears a tone of judgment in your voice when you're talking about other people, and you're criticizing and you're judgmental, the person assumes when you leave the room that you're going to be the same way toward them. So it's very important that you remove judgment out of your voice, that you remove that tone of criticism and negativity when you're speaking about other people, that judgment. Some of these are going to seem pretty similar. Gossip. For the same reason, gossip, when someone hears you gossiping about other people, it causes your words, your conversation to be less trusted because they assume that you're going to gossip about them. It's the same thing that when a person, even if they don't consciously do it, a gossiper is less trusted than someone who never gossips. They're not going to listen to you, and they're not going to speak to you. They're actually not going to tell you their secrets. They're not going to become your friend because they don't trust you. So gossip is number 2. Number 3, negativity. You know that negative person. Everything you say, well, I don't know if we can do that. The economy's going to be too bad, whatever. Negativity. Remove negativity out of your voice. That's not to say that you're going to be non-practical about life. Not that you're going to go to the opposite extreme and not have any wrestling with the pros and the cons of things. That's a completely different thing. I'm just talking about someone who's negative, someone who's a naysayer, someone who's always looking at the bad side instead of looking at the positive. A negative person is going to drain the emotional energy in a room or in a conversation, and people want to stay away from those people. So stay away from negative conversation, negative behavior. The next thing is complaining. Very similar. Complaining is very similar to negativity, but it's the person who's complaining about their pains and their aches. And, I'm sorry, but most people don't care. They just don't care that the struggles and the pains that you're going through. If you're talking to the doctor, you should be talking about your pains. But you don't need to be complaining about things that the other person can't help you with, or that you're not paying them to help you with. If you're not paying them to help you and they can't help you, and you're mentioning something that's negative, you're complaining. It's not doing you or them any good. It doesn't help to express your pains. So stop with the complaining. It's one of those things that will stop you from being heard. Next thing, excuses. Don't make excuses when someone talks to you, when someone starts to critique you or starts to judge you or starts to be negative toward you, and your automatic response is negativity or excuses. If you start telling your story as to why you do or why you don't do or why you have or why you don't have, telling excuses instead of listening and inclining yourself, don't be that kind of person that's always looking for a way out of pressure, a way out of conversation, because a lot of people in your life who care about you, they express this thing, they express this conversation with you that might feel to you like some of these negative things, but the moment they start to press you with some kind of conversation or a question and you start making excuses instead of inquiring, change the excuse to an inquiry. When someone says something to you and you automatically raise up in defense to excuse yourself or to make some kind of defense, instead use that moment to inquire, well, what do you mean by that? Or how do you think that would work in my life? And be the kind of person that's always curious, and change excuse for curiosity. One of the other things that we see in our profession is exaggeration. Excuse, exaggerate. Exaggerate. Exaggeration. When a person tells a story, I went fishing and I caught me. It's not, you can't do that. You can't always, everything can't be amazing. Everything can't be beautiful. Everything can't be terrific. Because when you finally do tell a story that's beautiful, amazing, and terrific, they're not going to believe you. You can't always be awesome. So don't be a person that's always exaggerating. Have tone of voice. Have timing and conversation that goes similar to poetry, the highs and the lows. Allow some of the things in life to be normal. And everything's not the best apple pie you ever ate. Don't exaggerate. Don't tell a story that's sensational. The sensational personality is not believable. So you actually want to increase your impact with people's lives. So you want to be believable. Start telling stories. It's great that you have a lot of stories, that you've lived a full life, that you have a lot of wonderful things in your life. But don't exaggerate everything. Don't exaggerate the size of the car or how much money you make. Next thing. And last on the list, 7 deadly conversations. Dogmatism. The person who is dogmatic. The person who is either religious or political or dietary or business, dogmatic. They're absolute. This is the way it's got to be. Everything's rock solid. Everything's sharp edges. The dogmatic person has a really hard time having a large group of friends. Now, you might have an absolute truth in your life. You might have a bunch of absolute truths in your life. But to come across dogmatic, that you're not flexible, that you're not conversing, that there's not a two-way street, that you have a rigid, solid conversation. Now, you can actually learn to stop being so rigid in your conversation. You might be rigid in your truth. There might be only one way that you see that a person becomes healthy, or someone becomes, you got a political arena that you absolutely believe is absolute truth and you're not going to change that. You can still come across not dogmatic. You can come across of giving someone, instead of insisting on your opinion, you can offer someone your suggestions. You can offer someone your opinion. And if a person's more inclined to listen to what you have to say, when you're not so dogmatic, when you're not so hard, cold facts kind of person. So here's the 7 negative sins. I'm going to fix those if you'll start replacing all those things with this other type of conversation. Honesty. Authenticity. Integrity. And love. You can replace much of that conversation, that negative stuff, with this. This is what people are looking for. For you to impact people, for you to communicate in a way that people want to listen to. They're listening for, subconsciously and consciously, they're listening for honesty. Is a person being true? Is this really who they are? Do they really believe the stuff that they're saying? Or are they just regurgitating somebody else's opinion? Authenticity. Talking about you is just as important as talking about them, but not in a way that it's all about you. Authenticity meaning that this is real. This is a subject. When you start applying your conversation, when you're authentic, you're saying, this is what I'm struggling with. You say your positives and your negatives as you're struggling. Your authenticity in your conversation. That you're not this person, this expert from afar that sits so high on a lofty perch that people can't reach you, they can't touch you. Authenticity is very, very important. They need to know some of your struggles. They need to know where you are with things, that you don't have to be standing as the guru sitting on the mountaintop with no imperfections. Authenticity. Integrity. Being completely, again, similar to honesty, being integrable, that when you say something that you're a follow-through kind of person. The person who goes out and says that they're going to do these great things, or they're promising something to somebody and they don't follow through, that causes your impact in a person's life. You lose emotional involvement. You lose that emotional connection, because that is where impact comes from. When someone is emotional, when someone feels emotionally safe with you, when someone's emotionally invested in you, when they feel like you've emotionally invested in them, there's this bridge, there's this conversation that happens even without the words. And that's the bridge that we want to ride for impact. That's the bridge that we want to communicate to, and that's where integrity comes. And lastly, it's love. When you're conversing with people, let them know that the seed of much of what you have to say is about them. You want not to convince them, but to help them. You want to impact a person's life for their benefit, for their dreams, and for their hope. That's the definition of love, that for you to be selfless, for them to be more. them to be more, you to be less. And so you're giving your opinions and your words and your conversation and your intellect to help them, to assist them, to be kind to them. And even though some of the stuff they say they might not agree with, even some of the things that you say they're going to struggle with intellectually or emotionally, when they know this, love is a motivation, it's so much easier to get through those things. So there's a quick impact. I'm going to talk to you more about public speaking and about how to impact a larger group of people, like if you're on the job or if you're in a seminar or if you're discussing things with a larger group of people. How does that type of conversation help? What works and what doesn't work in more of a public arena? So this will help you in your personal life and on the individual things. Hope that was a help to you. For more information or for regular teachings, go to billieber.com, subscribe to my blog. See you on the next one.